This is BBC News. I'm James Menendez. Our top stories. Breaking the Brexit deadlock, the British Prime Minister heads to Florence to set out her plans for leaving the European Union. The war of words between the United States and North Korea intensifies. Kim Jong-un describes President Trump as mentally deranged after his anti-Pyongyang speech at the UN. Utter mess, how teachers and pupils are describing the Turkish education system after the government imposes controversial non-secular lessons.
I'm Rachel Horne in the business news. Back from the cliff edge, Britain will push for a Brexit transition period that would keep it in the single market for 2 years. But can it break the stalemate over money? Plus, clouds gather over the US solar industry as a trade dispute with China heats up.
And welcome to the programme. The British Prime Minister is to set out proposals for ending the stalemate in the Brexit negotiations. In a landmark speech in Florence, Theresa May will offer to maintain payments into the EU budget in return for continued access to the single market for a transitional period of up to 2 years. She will say the EU has a profound sense of responsibility to agree a deal. From Florence, here's our political editor, Laura Kunsberg.
This city might be an escape from Westminster, yet the trickiness of our departure from the EU is no easier in a foreign language. And here on mainland Europe, as at home, threats to Theresa May lurk in many different corners. Before packing her bags, she had to try to get her cabinet on side. After 2.5 hours, an oh so natural display. Look, we all smile and agree.
Is Philip your new best friend?
Mr Gorky's cabinet united?
Very united. Very good. All behind the speech.
Mr Cairns, will EU leaders like what they hear in Florence?
We have to wait and see.
We don't have to wait for all the detail, though. The Prime Minister is expected to say for the first time explicitly the UK will seek a transition deal that could be up to 2 years long after we leave the EU. She's likely to signal too she might be ready to offer 20 billion euros so that no other country loses out from Brexit. But after we leave, the Prime Minister will make clear again she wants a bespoke trade arrangement, not a model based on any other. Remember, in the referendum, Leavers promised that we would get money back. But after a visit to number 10, this prominent Eurosceptic sounds completely on board with paying, if only for a couple of years.
Mr Jenkins, do you know what's in the speech?
We're leaving a big hole in their finances if we just leave. And if the European Union is going to deal constructively with us and reach a sensible agreement, well then there are reasonable political and diplomatic reasons why we should help them.
But in a transition, the EU's top negotiator has been firm we'd have to pay and play by their rules, saying there are still big uncertainties around our approach. In government circles, though, there's hope the speech can unlock the EU impasse. That's why the plans have been carefully kept under wraps.
And I have the British Prime Minister on the phone this afternoon. Don't tell the public, because the public will not be told.
But no more secrets on this speech on how decades of membership, ties of money, of politics will start to be phased out. There's much still for Britain to decide, though, for the EU to discuss. This is still the overture before we finally depart.
Laura Kunsberg reporting there. Now, North Korea's leader has vowed to make President Trump pay dearly for threatening to destroy North Korea if forced to defend itself. President Trump made the remarks at the United Nations on Tuesday. Kim Jong-un has now hit back in this war of words, calling Donald Trump mentally deranged. On Thursday, President Trump imposed new sanctions against individuals, companies and foreign banks that trade with Pyongyang. Well, let's speak to our correspondent, Danny Savage, who's in Seoul for us now. And Danny, I want to talk about the sanctions and what that involves in just a moment. But let's talk about that war of words, which seems to have intensified further with some comments from the North Korean foreign minister.
Yeah, we were talking probably just a few hours ago initially of the response from the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, who sort of issued a response a few days since that speech by Donald Trump, saying that he was considering what to do next. He was saying that he was basically deeply offended by what Donald Trump had said, called him deranged, and he would consider the highest level of hardline countermeasure in history to what Donald Trump had said. And remember, the bottom line at the moment from America is that North Korea will be destroyed if it was to threaten America or one of its allies. Now, add to that what is emerging from New York at the moment, and that is where basically reporters doorstep the North Korea foreign minister, stopped him as he was leaving a building to ask him a question about what all this could possibly mean. This is the man that'll be talking to the United Nations this weekend, giving North Korea's sort of official response to the UN. And he said of what this sort of countermeasure could be, it could be the most powerful detonation of an H-bomb in the Pacific. We have no idea about what actions could be taken, as it will be ordered by the leader Kim Jong-un. Now, what that is actually sort of hinting at is that basically North Korea is potentially threatening to detonate an H-bomb, something that they tested underground in their own country earlier this month, somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. Now, that would be an enormous jump forward in actions and rhetoric in this whole developing crisis, if you like, and what would happen thereafter, and where would it happen, how would it happen, how would the bomb be delivered, all this sort of thing. But it really does open up a whole new possibility, a whole new chapter of very worrying development in this whole situation, that North Korea is now on record from their foreign minister suggesting that they could be testing an H-bomb somewhere in the Pacific.
Danny, many thanks. The BBC's Danny Savage joining us live from Seoul in South Korea. Time for business. Rachel's here. Good morning.
Good morning, James. Unsurprisingly, we're also talking Brexit. We're starting in Florence, Italy, where, as you've been hearing, the British Prime Minister Theresa May will set out her position on Brexit in a speech later today. Now, with just 18 months to go before the UK is set to leave the EU, she hopes it will break the stalemate in negotiations. So what are we expecting? Well, sources have told the BBC that Theresa May will ask for a transition period of up to 2 years after the UK leaves in March 2019. Now, she will offer to keep paying into the EU budget during that transition, so other EU member states don't have to contribute more. At current levels, that would amount to around €20 billion. In return, she wants UK access to the EU single market and some form of customs union in the transition period. This will save British firms from a cliff edge situation and allow the UK time to negotiate new trade deals. Now, this won't end the wrangling over money. Counting long-term liabilities like EU pensions and debts, Brussels has put Britain's total exit bill at up to €100 billion. So will it break the deadlock? Well, we'll find out soon. The next round of Brexit negotiations start on the 25th of September. That's this Monday. And we'll be getting the views of a top Brexit watcher, economist Jonathan Portes from King's College London, in 20 minutes' time. Now, we're also in the US, where clouds are gathering over the solar energy industry. US manufacturers claim a surge of cheap solar panels from China is pushing them out of business. Two of them have taken their case to the US International Trade Commission. It decides today whether to slap tariffs on Chinese solar equipment. Their opponents say if that happens, it could mean higher prices and a slump in demand that would hit the whole industry. We'll have a full report in 20 minutes' time. In the meantime, you can keep in touch with me and the team. I'm on Twitter at BBC Rachel Horn. James.
See you later. Now, thousands of people are taken to the streets of Barcelona after police arrested a number of key officials trying to organise an independence referendum for Catalonia. The Spanish government says any vote on a split from Spain would be illegal. Last night, the leader of Catalonia's regional government said that he would defy the ban and push on with the referendum on October the 1st. Our correspondent Tom Burridge reports now from Barcelona.
They have their own national anthem, a language widely spoken. Catalans desperate to vote in a referendum on independence that the region's devolved government plans to hold in just 10 days' time. This a key moment because the Spanish state is now using its power to try and halt the vote.
We want democracy. Police repression, oppression, Spanish oppression won't stop us from voting.
A moment that will be written in our history books.
We are asking for democracy, that's all.
Human towers, part of Catalonia's distinct cultural identity.
I've watched the pro-independence movement in Catalonia in recent years as it was galvanised in the wake of the financial crisis across Spain, pushing and pressuring the Spanish government for a better economic deal for this region. Or better still, for these people, a Scottish-style independence referendum.
But if Spain has its way, this is the only ballot box they'll be seeing in the coming days. Because last night, Spanish police raided the offices of Catalonia's devolved government. Tens of thousands swarmed outside as Spain's Civil Guard police seized election material from the regional economy ministry. Trapped for hours, their vehicles parked amid the protest, the police eventually emerged. Huge tension, minimal violence. But Spain had made its move. 14 arrested, including senior Catalan politicians. As he warmed up in the Czech Republic, the hot political climate back home on the mind of one of Spain's biggest stars.
I love Catalonia. I really feel from Spain, so I can't imagine Spain without Catalonia and Catalonia without Spain, and I don't want to see it.
But tonight, the leader of Catalonia's government said contingency plans were in place. The referendum would happen. A declaration of independence from Spain, illegal or not, still on the cards. Tom Burridge, BBC News, in Barcelona.
Mexico's president says there could still be people alive in the rubble of 10 buildings which collapsed in Tuesday's earthquake. 273 people are now known to have died and thousands more have been injured. Our correspondent Rajini Vaidyanathan is in the capital city.
The rescue effort is in full force here in Mexico City. Close to 40 buildings collapsed in the earthquake on Tuesday. This building is in the fashionable La Condesa district, which is nicknamed Hipster Town. It's usually home to fashion designers, millennials and artists. Now, this operation that's going on at the moment is a rescue operation. The Marines and the armed forces here believe that there are people inside and they are trying to make contact with them. Now, as you can see, there are a lot of people and a lot of machinery as well working at the rubble. A lot of it is manual work too, people passing bits of the rubble hand to hand to remove it very carefully because it's a precarious operation. International assistance has also arrived here. The Israeli government has sent help and they are actually involved in this particular rescue operation. And while people wait, there are doctors on standby as well, ready to treat anyone who is rescued and who comes out. Now, periodically, this place falls silent. People put their hands up and they are told to be silent while rescuers try to call out to people who they believe are trapped in the rubble. It's not just officials who are helping with the rescue efforts here. Many of these people are volunteers who are giving up their own time, pitching in to try and rescue as many people as they can. The atmosphere here is very intense. It's one of anticipation. People are still hopeful that many more people will be found in the rubble alive.
Rajini Vaidyanathan there in Mexico City. Do stay with us here on BBC News. Still to come, the renowned Michelin-starred chef who's following the old adage about coping with pressure. He's decided he can't take the heat, so he's getting out of the kitchen.
Ben Johnson, the fastest man on earth, is flying home to Canada in disgrace.
All the athletes should be clean going into the games. I'm just happy that justice is served.
It is a simple fact that this morning these people were in their homes. Tonight those homes have been burnt down by Serbian soldiers and police.
All the Taliban positions along here have been strengthened presumably in case the Americans invade.
It's no use having a secret service which cannot preserve its own secrets against the world. And so the British government has no option but to continue this action, and even after any adverse judgment in Australia.
Concorde had crossed the Atlantic faster than any plane ever before, breaking the record by 6 minutes.
You're watching BBC News, the latest headlines. The British Prime Minister heads to Florence to set out her proposals for leaving the European Union and breaking the Brexit deadlock. The war of words between the United States and North Korea intensifies. Kim Jong-un describes President Trump as mentally deranged after his anti-Pyongyang speech at the UN. Mr. Trump has announced further trade sanctions. Pupils in Turkey began the new school year this week with controversial changes to the curriculum. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution has been removed for younger students, and there are new lessons on jihad taught as love for the homeland. It's prompted further criticism that the Islamic government is trying to impose its values on a previously secular education syllabus. Our Turkey correspondent Mark Lowen has this report.
Seray Taştan used to feel confident about what her son Arda would be learning. Not anymore. With the new school year, a new curriculum. He'll no longer find evolution or Darwin in his school books, but will read of jihad as love for the homeland. Turkey's secular founding father Ataturk is less prominent, and his school must now have a prayer room.
I'm worried for my children's future. They're engineering society, expecting us only to be Sunni Muslims. If you're teaching the Prophet Muhammad and adding in jihad, it will encourage an ISIS-like mentality. And by diminishing scientific thought, I'm terrified by this idea. It'll be the end of this country.
The changes have sparked protests by those fearing the Islamist government is further eroding Turkey's secular constitution. More than 170 reforms are being made. And this is what can happen if you criticize. An exhibition promoting science is attacked by a mob. Leftist unions say they're not listened to, and that Turkey's education system is being dumbed down with less scientific rigor and new lessons about terrorists and the failed coup.
The government is trying to raise children who only believe religious dogma without questioning or being curious about science, because evolution makes you question. I'm absolutely ready to lose my job by fighting against this.
Evolution theory hasn't gone, but it'll be taught to older students who the authorities say grasp it better. In this conservative high school, past reforms are clear. The headscarf was banned in schools until the Erdogan government. His campaign song is the school bell. The director defends the changes.
Children were having a hard time understanding evolution, so the change is based on families' complaints. There is no Muslim influence on education. We teach different religions and nobody interferes with each other's faith. But you cannot take Islam out of Turkey or Turkey out of Islam.
Curriculum reform goes to the heart of Turkey's age-old dividing line between secular and religious. It's so contentious because this country is more polarized than ever along that divide, both sides trying to shape the next generation, and education now the key battleground between the two. Their ideas will determine Turkey's future path. With President Erdogan's stated goal of raising a pious generation, the new curriculum seems destined to mold Turkey in his image. Mark Lowen, BBC News, Istanbul.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the news today. The United States is to provide nearly $700 million in additional humanitarian assistance for Syrians. $500 million will be distributed inside Syria. The rest will go to Lebanon, Jordan and Turkey, which are hosting up to 5 million refugees from the conflict. The UN Security Council has warned that a planned referendum on independence in the Kurdish region of Iraq could have a potentially destabilizing impact. In a unanimous statement, the 15 council members said the vote would detract from the fight against Islamic State militants. Banks and building societies in the UK are to carry out checks on all current account holders to identify illegal immigrants. From January, they'll have to check customers' names against a database supplied by the Home Office. Some people, including those who've overstayed their visas or had asylum applications refused, will have their accounts closed or frozen. The head of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, says that the company will give the US Congress information about thousands of political adverts that were paid for by Russians during last year's presidential election. He said he would work with others towards new standards of transparency for political advertising. In future, all such adverts will make it clear who paid for them. Our North America editor, John Sopel, has more from Washington.
It is significant. After the EU referendum in Britain, the phrase that gained currency was post-truth. Often in the presidential election last year, it felt like we were going through no truth. Social media was awash with advertisements masquerading as serious news stories. They were invariably fake, and they were also invariably in favour of Donald Trump and against Hillary Clinton. Things like Hillary Clinton sold weapons to Islamic State. Hillary Clinton has had murdered her FBI officer involved in unmasking the email inquiry. And also things like, in a surprise move, Donald Trump gains the backing of Pope Francis. Now, all of this had an impact because in the end of the election, more people were reading the fake news stories, according to a survey, than the real news. And so, under enormous pressure, Facebook is going to show the transparency that it is often talked about and is going to reveal just where the source of those adverts came from, how much the Russians paid, where they were all going. Now, this will answer one question from the presidential election, the extent of Russian involvement. The question it won't answer is what impact those fake news stories had on the electorate. That will still be hotly contested between the Trump supporters, who will say it had no impact, and the Hillary Clinton supporters, who said it changed the election result.
John Sopel there in Washington. A global survey commissioned by the BBC has found increasing opposition to any form of governmental regulation of the internet. It found that the proportion opposed to regulation has risen from 51% to 58% since 2010. Only two of the countries surveyed, Britain and China, were in favour. The survey also found that 80% of those questioned were anxious about fake content on the internet. Don't forget, for more on all our stories and analysis from our correspondents around the world, just go to our website. It's bbc.com/news. Sport now, and Premier League champions Chelsea have agreed terms with Atletico Madrid for the striker Diego Costa to rejoin them in January. The 28-year-old refused to return to Stamford Bridge this season after falling out with manager Antonio Conte. A fee in the region of $80 million is reported to have been agreed between the clubs. Manchester United Chief Executive Ed Woodward expects Facebook and Amazon to enter the mix when the next English Premier League TV rights deal is negotiated later this year. The current domestic and overseas broadcast deals are worth a combined total of $11 billion. Woodward said he believed the Premier League would welcome a bid for the likes of Facebook and Amazon. Earlier this month, Facebook failed with a $600 million bid for the digital rights to the Indian Premier League. Now, for many chefs, winning a Michelin star is considered the pinnacle of their career. But renowned French chef Sébastien Brasse has asked to be stripped of his prestigious 3 stars. He says the pressure to earn them again every year at his restaurant in the village of La Guiole in southern France is proving too much of a strain. Sarah Corker reports.
Perched above the Aubrac Plateau in southern France, the food at La Souquet is inspired by the forests and meadows nearby. Critics describe Sébastien Brasse's food as spellbinding, but the celebrated chef is walking away from the ultra-competitive world of Michelin star cooking. The pressure to satisfy the food inspectors has proved too much.
Well, we've been carrying these stars for 10 years, but for a few years now we've been saying to ourselves, but for how long will we continue to have this tension, felt every day? For how long? Do we want this until the end of our career?
The chef announced the news in this Facebook video.
Dans le silence et la solitude, on n'entend plus que l'essentiel.
He wants to be dropped from the famous Red Guide so he can start a new chapter in his life. The chef is famed in France for his gargouilles, a mix of up to 80 vegetables, herbs and flowers. His is one of only 27 French restaurants in the elite 3 Michelin star club. The guide describes it as our highest award given for the superlative cooking of chefs at the peak of their profession. Mr Brass's decision has shocked some in the culinary world, reigniting a debate in France over the pressures faced by top chefs.
The offer is not going to change. I even think my kitchen is going to somehow feel liberated, open-minded, more relaxed.
Just asking to return the stars doesn't mean Michelin will automatically remove the restaurant. It says it will consider the request. But Mr Brass says he wants to be free to cook in serenity. Sarah Corker, BBC News.
A reminder of our top story this hour. The British Prime Minister heads to Florence to set out her proposals for leaving the European Union and breaking the Brexit deadlock. You can get in touch with me at James Menendez on Twitter. I'll be back with headlines in just a couple of minutes' time, and then it's business with Rachel. Please stay with us.
Hello, as one weather front clears away from the UK, another is on the way in the day ahead. A day that starts chilly under largely clear skies, especially in rural spots. Low single figures, a touch of frost on the grass, maybe the cars for some of us, and perhaps some spots in Scotland, all the way down to freezing as the day begins. Here is the next weather system, though, and actually to start Friday, that will be pushing quickly rain across Northern Ireland with a freshening wind and just fringing into western parts of Scotland at this stage. This is the picture across the UK at 8 o'clock in the morning. But away from the rain, though, it will be that chilly but sunny start for many of us. But bear in mind there could be a few mist and fog patches, more especially in parts of England and Wales, and perhaps more likely to be in parts of East Anglia and South East England. We won't all see it, but where you do, be aware that that is a possibility. Shouldn't last too long into the morning. So we are watching this system coming in. A wet morning in Northern Ireland, but then in the afternoon the rain pulls away. It'll brighten up. Quite windy with that through the Irish Sea, so quite blowing on some coasts. Outbreaks of rain push across Scotland into Wales and Western England, maybe a few spots to the Midlands, North East England as we go on through the afternoon, but much of East Anglia and South East England will stay dry. Still perhaps some sunny spells the further east you are, and temperatures up to around 19 degrees, but quite cool where you have the cloud, the rain and the brisk wind. This weather system looks like it stalls across parts of England and Wales going through Friday night with patchy light rain and drizzle, but it does mean that going into Saturday morning it will be much milder compared with Friday morning. Now, the big picture going into the weekend has a deep area of low pressure to the west of the UK. I'm not too concerned about that. That's pushing its way northwards, but a trailing weather front looks like it will be coming in, and ahead of it there will be quite a windy picture for some of us across western areas during Saturday. That wind freshening with perhaps gales developing in places. A lot of cloud, patchy rain to begin with in England and Wales on Saturday, pushing northwards into some of Scotland, though the far north of Scotland should stay quite sunny. A few sunny spells in Northern Ireland, but brightening up quite nicely through much of Wales and southern England through the day, and some warmth in that southerly flow with temperatures up to around 20, maybe 21 Celsius. For Sunday, some uncertainty about the position of this area of rain coming in from the west. Either side of it there'll be some sunny spells and the wind easing during Sunday.
There are many movies out at the moment that are claiming to be comedies. This beats all of them. And on the one hand, it's a political tale. On the other hand, it is magic, realist fable. It is baggy and overlong. You can either just see it as a really good popcorn adventure or as something much deeper. That's what a proper cult movie looks like. My problem with it is I wanted it to be darker. The script is laughable, but not in a good way. This has proved so divisive. I was reminded of the friendship between Elliot and E.T. Every time anyone says mockumentary, immediately think, is it as good as Spinal Tap? The answer is no. Very smartly reinvented a franchise, and who thought that was possible? It does the thing that cinema is meant to do at its very best, to completely immerse you, to transport you, to take you to another world.
Words of Wisdom, the film review, today at 5:45 on the BBC News Channel.
We're living in an extraordinary